Welcome to the Dental School Guide podcast, your ultimate destination for all things dentistry. I'm Dr. Tanner Townsend, your guide through the complex world of dental education. Join us as we uncover the secrets of acing dental school admissions, navigating residency programs, and exploring career opportunities. Please share and enjoy. Real quick, just wanted to make all you pre-dental students out there aware of a resource. If you've ever been worried about getting into dental school or are wanting to get into that school of your dreams, then you definitely want to check out a program called Dental School Guide. In the program, we walk you through how to save money, time, and heartache when applying to dental school. There's so much fluff out there when it comes to resources for getting into school, and we are streamlining all of that. With our comprehensive digital course, expert mentorship, and personalized application review services, you'll have everything you need to stand out to admission committees. Take advantage of this amazing resource that will help you increase your chances of getting into dental school. You'll want to check out dentalschoolguide.com. Check it out. Welcome back to the Dental School Guide podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tanner Townsend, and today we have Dr. Salter on with us, who is the Director of Admissions at Howard University. Dr. Salter, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
We are super excited to have you on. So, give us a little background, Dr. Salter. Who are you, and how did you end up at Howard, and how did you become a dentist?
Okay. So I'm from Georgia, and I'm from a very small town in Georgia. We only had one dentist in the entire county. So at around sixth grade, I gained a big interest in the dentist based off of a cartoon that I watched when I was a kid. And so my mom would take me on Saturdays to shadow that dentist at the encouragement of one of my teachers, and I've been hooked since then. So I always had the intentions of becoming a dentist since the sixth grade. I went off to Xavier University in New Orleans for my undergraduate studies, and once I left there, I attended Howard University here in Washington, D.C. for dental school, and I did my residency in the Navy. I had the Navy scholarship while in school, which was a big help for me financially. So I spent some time in the Navy practicing dentistry before returning back to Washington, D.C., where I practice here. Since 2003 now, I've been back. So it's been a wonderful ride. I had Fridays was my day off at the office, so the dean of the dental school asked me to come. I have an MBA as well, so he would ask me to come to teach the practice management class, and from that one lecture, it led to becoming full-time here at the school doing academia. So I retired from full-time practice in 2018. I still practice one day a week just to keep my hands wet, but academia is what I do full-time now.
That is awesome. So they got you. They saw the MBA, and they're like, we got our man to teach that practice management class.
Yeah, it hooked me in. But I love it.
That is awesome. Well, that sounds like an awesome intro to how you got into Howard. Well, we're going to dive in today. We're going to talk a lot about the school of Howard itself, what makes it special, and then we'll kind of talk about the pre-admissions process and the interview process, and then we'll kind of wrap up with some advice. But
Sure.
To start, let's talk about Howard itself and it as a school. Tell us, what makes Howard so unique as a dental school, and what sets it apart?
Okay. Well, the main thing, or there are two main things. One is that we are located in the nation's capital. We are the only dental school here in the nation's capital. We do have our sister schools, VCU and University of Maryland. VCU to the south of us, about an hour and a half in Richmond, and the University of Maryland about an hour and a half north of us in Baltimore. But we are unique to the district as the only healthcare facility for dental education. So that is great in itself. Not only that our students get a wide array of patients from not Washington, D.C., but from Maryland and Virginia. We call it the DMV, Maryland, Virginia. So we have a widespread, just a great ledger of patients from that area. And then it also places us our students in a unique position to be close to the nation capital legislators, where we definitely encourage and get them involved with the policy side of dentistry. They spend some time on Capitol Hill meeting legislators, and that's part of the curriculum, the class that they take here, public health and community outreach. We are close to NIH, where our students do research externship. We have a cadre of students who are going there who will spend their summer there. So that has been really great. Just the position of where we are has been a blessing for the school in itself. The
Wow.
other aspect of Howard is that we are a historically black college university. And a lot of students get that, they misunderstand that. They think that we are exclusively um, black in our population. That is not true. Our university is very, very diverse. We have students from all races, religions, nationalities. It's just historically the university was founded for that particular purpose. And besides us, there's Meharry Medical College in Nashville, who have the moniker of being a historically black college. So those are just some of the few highlights about Howard that I love and treasure.
Well, that is awesome. I think you touched on some excellent points there. I think going to school in the DMV is quite unique, and being able to interact with the legislation and all that good stuff, and then having the school just kind of there. There's so much to do in the DMV, and there's so many potential patients that you guys can draw on. I think you're quite
Yeah,
uniquely positioned in that factor.
yeah, yeah. It's a blessing and a curse of having a lot of things to do when you're in dental school.
Yeah, it totally is when you're super busy and slammed with school, and then you're like, man, there's so many cool things that I want to do that are kind of in the area. So you kind of touched on something that I was hoping you would bring up. So tell me a little bit more about this legislation class and
Hmm.
exactly what in the public health realm you guys do at Howard with the
Hmm.
students.
So it's called community dentistry, and that is actually one of the divisions here. And so one of the things we do is we get our students out in the community with health fairs, screenings, um, various activities that would get them acclimated with their surroundings. Because our dean, our president, even um, wanted to be understood that Howard is a part of the community, and we know that a lot of access to care and limited access to care, the barriers that are there are due to legislative policies. So we talk about that in our community dentistry class. We talk about how do we lift those barriers and what can we do as practitioners to lift those barriers. And we know that a lot of that begins with talking to our legislators. So we want to make sure that they have the training. We want to make sure that they are learning where to find the policies, how to read them. And then when you have that legislator in front of you, how do you approach them? How do
Hmm.
you become involved with organized dentistry so that you can make a positive impact, from a larger scale, not just from the healthcare delivery aspect, but from the policy aspect.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that a lot of schools might not have the opportunity to do just based on their location
Yeah.
of knowing how to interact with the legislation, how to interact with your state dental association, and how to positively impact change. So I think that's something really cool that Howard is able to do to kind of help
Mhm.
bolster up their education in a unique aspect. So that is awesome.
Um, Yeah, that was one of the things that attracted me when I was a young student. I met one of the recruiters from Howard, and that, as it is, like you just said, it was so unique about that school. And when she began to talk about meeting senators and how you can meet your
Yeah.
your commissioners in the city, that was something I never thought about as a young student. I'm like, wow, I just want to do dentistry. I didn't realize
Uh-huh.
that world that centered around being in the chair and actually treating your patient. How do we get the patient in the chair? Is what is the objective of the class and what we're trying to accomplish.
Hmm. And I think a lot of it centers around that legislation of like how can we promote this to help the community as a whole. So that is
Mhm.
really cool. So you had also mentioned like some outreach programs. A lot of schools do, like externships where they rotate, especially like third and fourth year, out in the community. Tell us a little bit more about that, of how this externship works, and kind of are they doing dentistry in the community? Are they
Mhm.
just going to schools and doing fluoride and prophies for kids? How does that work at Howard?
Hmm. So, the second year students, they definitely start out with the screening, the oral health screening, and treatment planning. Our third and fourth year, they have more extensive experiences. They rotate to clinic on the Eastern Shore. We have the clinics here in Washington, D.C., and we've just added, they are rotating now out to Oakland, California. We have a partnership with the clinic there where they
Whoa.
actually treat patients. Yeah, it's been really great. We try to do what we can. Our dean has been really big on trying to get them outside of the walls of the school so that they can put into practice all of those behavioral dentistry techniques that they've learned. We
Wow,
have
that's great.
here, yeah, it's been great, man. I love that.
So, so how I know like different schools have different opinions on the externships of how many days a student gets to go outside the
Mhm.
school and practice. How many days are they getting? And like for that Oakland one, for example, how long are they going for? Are you guys kind of helping cover that cost? Is housing covered? Things like that?
Everything is covered under a grant, and they are there for 3 weeks, 3 weeks at a time. And one of the things we do, we try to get one of our faculty members out there while each group rotate, so that we have someone, familiar face that's
Uh huh.
there. And I guess you could say keep an eye on our students to make sure that you know what they are learning is put into practice. And the team out there, the practitioners out there at Oakland, they know our objectives. They look at our clinical manual. They see what it is that how we are giving that knowledge to our students, the steps that we want them to take, um, as students as they are out there rotating. So it's been really good partnership.
Well, that's really cool. I think that's a very unique opportunity. I know some schools will send you to different states or let you find your own. Like right now, where I'm at in Montana, AT Still Arizona sends their kids up here to a couple of our offices, and so it's unique. But that's cool that you're able to get that experience for the students in Oakland for 3 weeks at a time, which really lets them get their fingers wet. Dr. Salter, what kind of support does your school offer to students? Like, let's say a student is struggling in class, like their D1 classes, or they're struggling with like lab. What kind of support do you guys offer for students that may be struggling in a class?
hmm so the first thing we do is once they are admitted, each student is assigned to a peer mentor who is an upperclassman. So they have that one-on-one relationship there. We find that students tend to respond a little better to people in their own age group or peer group. So we start there. That's usually their, I would call it their first line of defense when it comes to academic advice, etc. And then we have in our Office of Student Affairs, we have a tutoring program. Well, first of all, we have a summer program. It's called the Preliminary Academic Reinforcement Program. So a select number of students may be placed in that program where they will come in during the summer and they are introduced to those first semester courses that they're going to have in dental school, and we track those students throughout the first year. And we have our tutoring program here, where if a student is having some difficulties or challenges or just need advice when it comes to the class, again, those are upperclassmen who have performed well in that class, and they can seek the aid of those students in that class. When it comes to the hands-on skills, the labs, it can be it can be a lot different from the actual theoretical side of dentistry. We do have what we call our teaching assistants, or these are students who again have performed well in those courses, and they are in the lab with us when we are teaching the lab, so that they can assist those students who may need a little extra focus, a little extra guidance, and we have those extra sessions for those students, which the TAs are also involved in that as well.
Okay, well, that's great. So it sounds like there's a lot of lines of defense, whether it's like your peer mentor or, hey, let's have you come in the summer before, and we're going to make sure that you get through that. Just having that support there from the school, just to know that, hey, we got your back. We're going to get you through. We want you to become a dentist. So that's great. What are some things that every school has got things that they're working on to improve, just to make it better in general? What are some things that you guys at Howard are currently working on to help make better for future classes of
hmm
students?
hmm Well, we just finished the build out of a new clinic here in the
How cool.
school. Yeah, so that's been great. So I'm looking forward to the students transitioning. We work in a module system. The students are divided into three different modules. So I'm looking forward to them being able to access that new clinic. I'm not sure if that's going to be a fourth module or what the plans are for that. And then we just recently brought on a new president for the university, but our last president, he put into play a very huge strategic plan, which included a new building for our medical, dental, and pharmacy school. So his vision was for all three of those schools to be housed in one facility. So that they are supposed to start construction on that building in 2025. So probably not the students in this cycle, but the students who apply in the next cycle who come to Howard will probably be the first class that enter and leave from uh, our uh, new dental medical school. It's going to be great for interprofessional education and collaboration, having all those students in healthcare in one facility. Right now, we're next door to the medical school, but the pharmacy school is a little further north on the campus. So that is going to be great for their education as well. But I'm
Well,
looking forward to the new building.
I'm looking forward to that for you guys. That is awesome. We at VCU where I went, they were in the process of trying to make a building similar to that where it would house a multidiscipline thing with dental involved, and it ended up not happening. But that is just the concept of that is really cool. Just being able to collaborate with each other and refer to each other, and because you're all right there.
Yeah.
I think that is an excellent. I think that's the way it should go. So that's really quite nice.
Hmm. Yeah, it is.
All right. Well, that's kind of the questions about the school, and of course there are a million and a half things that we could potentially ask with that. But let's kind of jump into the dental admission side of things. So we're going to start really broad, and then we're going to kind of get a little bit more narrow as we go.
Okay.
But walk us through from the time like applications open and people are able to submit their applications. Walk us through that admissions process at Howard. What does it look like?
Okay. So, as a lot of advice that's floating around out there, students have a wealth of resources. I'm always intrigued when I talk to a student about the advice that they get. Whether it's on online chats or from pre-dental advisors, current students, former students, etc. So I know it can be a bit overwhelming and confusing. So this is my philosophy on that. So the application cycle typically opens in June. One thing that I always hear from students is everyone say, apply early. So they place this huge amount of stress on themselves to get their application in on June 1st when the application portal opens. And I always tell students when I have the opportunity, don't rush to get your application in on June 1st. One, because most admissions director, my colleagues, we're just getting back into the summer semester if school's in session then. And then it doesn't just involve one person. There are multiple people who will have to review these applications, determine who will get an interview, etc. So summer is pretty safe to say. Now, I don't know every admissions director across the country, but just based on my experience, it's safe to say that's not going to happen during the summer. Right? So
Yeah.
it's
It's
just not.
summertime. No one wants to just be sitting in the office reviewing personal
Yeah,
statements. Like they have a life too.
exactly. So my advice to students, number one, finish your spring semester strong. The last thing you want is to apply early for dental school in June, and then you spend so much time focusing on the DAT that you slip up in some classes. Your third and fourth year, those are not the years that you want C's or even anything less than C's on your transcript, because everybody understands your first year of college, you're transitioning. So, you're learning how to study, you're learning things about yourself, you may be away from home. So I think it's safe to say we all are empathetic when there are some slip ups during that first year. But by the time you get to your third year, you should have found your groove. And to have C's on your transcripts when you are a third year or fourth year, that's, you can recover, but it's kind of difficult to recover from something like that. So I say finish your spring semester strong. That's number one. Spend the summertime really studying for that DAT, really focusing
Mm-hmm.
on those subject matters. I know they have, I'm learning from, I love being around young people. They're teaching me all of these new things. They have apps now and all of this stuff, and those are great. But I'm very old school. There's nothing in my mind that's better than a textbook. So even if I use my app on my phone, I'm on the train or on the bus or in the park, and I'm looking at my app, and there's just question after question in that same subject matter that I am not getting correct on those sample tests. to me, that indicates I need to pick up the textbook. So that's another piece of advice that I rarely hear students say anyone say to them. Um, I always say endeavor to take the DAT no later than August 1st, because now we're getting back into that period where school is about to start. Now, that is when directors are going to start looking at applications, etc. But during the summer and during spring and during the summer, you should have asked for strong letters of recommendation. One big mistake students do is they ask a faculty member or professor for a recommendation. That's different from asking for a
A letter of
strong letter.
recommendation. Yeah.
Hmm. Very different. So, take the DAT, I would say by August 1st. You get the grades back the same day. And a lot of students don't realize that on the admission side, we get those scores at the same time. So
Hmm.
we know what you've made when you get your results as well. So if the application is ready, you have the scores you want. All you have to do now is hit that submit button. Here at Howard, we start our first interview in mid-September. Because, like I say, we start reviewing applications in August. I usually now take a peek at, a few. I usually do my vacation at the beginning of August, so I usually will take a peek at a couple of applications while I'm on vacation. But I hit it hard once we get back in middle August. We start our interviews in September. We interview up until November, and every school in the country, they have to release their acceptance list on December 1st.
Hmm.
December 15th now. Um, so what's late? Late is if you are taking the DAT anywhere in September, October, and you're getting your application in after that, you're late. What a lot of students, I'm still talking to students now who took the DAT in December, and, they're wondering,
Yeah.
students have this famous question, what can I do better? Um, but, getting your application in timely is the first thing that you can do. If you take the DAT in December, we're not going to see your scores until December, and you've already missed all of the interviews. Um, when January comes, I'm pulling people from my wait list. I'm not interviewing new people. So
Hmm.
that's a mouthful, but it's really understanding that timeline. That is
Yeah.
probably the most detrimental thing for students.
I think we see a lot of that just out there in the social media and things like that, and other people we've spoken to, is just that there's a big misconception on, like you said, what that timeline is, when things should be turned in, and like making sure like you're on track with that kind of stuff. Like
Yeah.
you don't need to rush to have it in June 1st. I mean, you got a little bit of leeway,
Mhm.
but yet you definitely don't want to wait past the summertime.
No.
So I love that you said that. Now, something that you said, I kind of want to unpack a little bit more. You said in the very beginning, like when you're an undergrad, you see a lot of students that might, they're figuring college out, and that first year they might be getting some C's and things like that. But you definitely don't want to see third and fourth year struggling in classes.
Mhm.
Um, Walk us through like how you guys look at that transcript.
Mhm.
Um, when you see those C's or like a withdraw, for example, what goes through your head in determining, hey, let's give this person an interview, or
Mhm.
hey, maybe we set you aside for next year?
Mhm. Yeah, that's when it starts to get a little tricky. Because one thing you want to do is take the whole person. I'm going to
Yeah,
flip that question a little bit. Let's say I get a student who is all A's or all A's and a couple of B's, and this student is excelling or what have you. That doesn't always make you a great candidate for dental school, because now I'm going to look and say, okay, who are you outside of the library?
yeah,
What is your role in the community? Where's your volunteerism? Where are you on the social spectrum? I mean, dentistry is a part of healthcare. All healthcare practitioners are, but dentistry certainly is not a fan favorite with a lot of patients. So you have to have a good level of social skills. So, can you demonstrate that I can excel in the classroom, but I have some social skills? So getting all A's is not, always the end all, the meet all. You have to have some personality there, and you need to demonstrate that in the application. Now, let's look at that student who may have some hiccups there along the way.
The question is, did you improve? And
Mm-hmm.
improvement over time, and did you put strategies in place to help you improve? You may have, if we look at a lot of students ask me all the time, do you all use a holistic view in application? We absolutely do. So if I look at your application and you are having quite a few hiccups, quite a few W's, quite a few C's, and let's be honest, quite a few F's, and you're retaking classes, but you're just extremely active on class, that means you do not have your priorities together
Mm-hmm.
quite yet. So that may, from another person purview, that may mean you may need a little time to roast in the oven a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
to use season. What does that mean? That may mean a little more time in the field working. That may mean some graduate studies, a post-bac, just until you can demonstrate that maturity level and decision making processes are there. It's very difficult to advocate for a student who's withdrawing and making C's in their third and fourth year.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to make a case for that student at that point because it's like, all right, guys, you got to be figuring this out. If this is
Mm-hmm.
what you really want to do,
Mm-hmm.
you got to be putting in the time. You had mentioned like with the transcripts there you kind of take a holistic approach, but you also want to see that person cook in the oven and maybe even do a little bit more work.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say the students got like, hey, we need to do a post-bac or a master's program. How do you guys evaluate that? Is it just like you had said, hey, this person's improved, they
Mm-hmm.
made excellent strides during their postgraduate studies, I think we give them a shot? How does that factor into your guys' evaluation?
Mm-hmm. Well, and for us, our committee is always made up of five people. We always want an odd number. So if your record can convince three of the five that you deserve a shot, you're going to get that shot. So everybody brings a different perspective to the table when we are reviewing. I always, for me, not to say that my colleagues are not, but I consider myself to be very empathetic because coming from a rural area, we didn't always have the resources.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went off to college, um, I went to college thinking I was smart, but I got to college and learned that I didn't know how to study. So sometimes that curve is a little slower. Now I did well, but I didn't excel like I did when I was in high school. So I always take that into consideration when I look at a young person's application. But you can make a case for a student if they have a bad semester because as a person, every season is not going to be great. You know, but if there are multiple seasons or multiple semesters where a student has some struggle, then it doesn't mean that they're out of the game. It just means maybe we need a little bit more training. There are things we can do. Uh, I always tell those students if your GPA is not where you want it to be when you apply to dental school, a post-bac is not the way to go. You really want to do a master's program, and I always advocate for a master's in biomedical science. Why? Because in that program, you're going to take exactly the classes you will take in dental school.
Mm-hmm.
And that's your second shot at life because if you do well in those classes in your master's, you're now demonstrating to those people who may be naysayers, I can handle that curriculum. You know, um, a post-bac is more fast track, a brief overview. So it, when I graduated college in the 90s, yeah, post-bac was the way to go. But that's not necessarily the best option for all students. So it really requires you to sit down and have someone to unpack that application with you.
I think that's a really cool point that you just pointed out. And so, if I understand you correctly, and you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong here, but you guys like the master's programs better than the post-bac because it shows that you can handle dental school courses.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
and that makes total sense because we see a lot of students that like doing the post-bacs because it's short
Yep.
and they want to get into dental school fast. But sometimes if you really want it and your grades aren't there, the master's is definitely the way to go because when you're applying, like it's so interesting to me that the application opens on June 1st, and a lot of times those post-bac programs don't start till like May or June.
Yeah,
So you guys can't even see anything.
that's
How-
correct.
so it makes it really hard on your guys' end to be like, well, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But So you had mentioned that you guys do a committee approach and you like to keep an odd number and you have 5 people on your guys' committee to evaluate and review those applications. So kind of take us through your day when you're walking through those different interview or different applicants when they first come in. Are you all just sitting in a room together reading and reading and reading and reading all day, or what does that look like?
So let's talk about the behind the scenes, what students don't see. That it starts with actually reviewing the applications. So we have a scoring system, if you will. It's called the review. So now we are reviewing those students that we think should have a shot at an interview. So it starts, yes, with the DAT score and the GPA. One thing I will insert in there, when students say my GPA is blah, 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 I always give them a few minutes because I'm looking for two things. I'm looking for your overall GPA and I'm looking for your science GPA. A lot of students don't realize that. But, again, if you read a lot of sites, especially when you register for the DAT and start to apply for the dental school, you will see we look at your overall and your science GPA because a lot of students are not science majors, right? So we want to see both. The other thing with the DAT, a lot of times students will give me one score. I scored a 23 on the DAT. Well, that's your overall, yes, your academic average. What is your science score? So we look at those from two facets. But so that's the review part. We read the recommendations. We make sure all the recommendations are there. A lot of students get eliminated, if you will, because recommendations are not correct. The application process is very specific. Your professors or dentists in the community, they make sure that the letter recommendation is on letterhead and signed. So I've found in talking with students, they don't take the time to instruct the person writing the letter. This is what I need. And I think people would appreciate it more if they were, because everybody that write a letter is not going to be familiar with that process, especially practitioners in the community. They may write the letter on a blank sheet of paper and not sign it, so it's not acceptable. So those are the things that happen behind the scenes that a student will not realize. Now, if you're fortunate enough to get the interview when you come in, right now we're doing virtual. We're still doing virtual interviews. But we use the same format, which is you come in, you meet all of the other interviewees, you will meet all of the interviewers, you'll meet myself, you will meet the dean. The dean always come in and greet the students and talk about the school. We give you a financial aid session to tell you ways you can finance your education, and then you break off and go into your interview. And in the interview, there will be 3 people, not 5. You will have a faculty member, a student, and an alum who will do your interview. We all individually rate that student. The scores are tallied up, and then it go before the admissions committee, which is a group of 5 people who then will determine who has received a letter of acceptance or not.
Gotcha. Wow, that is awesome. I thank you so much for kind of unpacking the behind the scenes, and it's so enlightening to see like what really goes behind closed doors of getting everyone ready to rock and roll with those interviews and picking students. So in terms of the interviews, are they more formal interviews? You said there's multiple different people that you guys interview with. Are they more formal questions? Are they more just casual, laid back? Let's see how the person is socially and in a cultural. Are they a cultural fit kind of thing?
Oh yeah, our interviews are very laid back. We're not trying to take water from a rock, if you will.
Yeah.
One thing I always say in my speech when the students get here in the group, I always say, listen, if we invited you here for an interview, clearly we are interested. So
Yeah.
you're on the 5-yard line. Don't fumble now. Don't try to be someone you're not. Just be authentically yourself. What you have done has spoken for you. You got you here. We just want to elaborate on that a little more. And even if we ask you a challenging questions, one thing I will say, my freebie for the night, we may not necessarily be looking for the correct answer. Just how do you handle when you are in a sticky situation? How do you handle it? is the maturity there? Are the thought processes there where you can at least kind of reason your way out of it? Is the honesty there when you're able to say, I don't know right now, but I'll look it up? So those small things like that.
Yeah, I loved what you just said right there. I think that is such a huge thing where when we've been talking to different admissions people, it's not so much of answering the right question, it's just being honest.
Yeah,
And like you said, if you don't know the answer, just own it, like
that's right.
don't fake it. And here's another question for you. How, like, when you have a student in there for an interview, and not to be negative or anything like that, but when you have a student in there and you can tell they're not being as authentic as you'd hope they would be, like, how obvious is that to you?
Um, I can think of only a few instances where it's obvious. Um, but there have been a lot of situations where it comes to light. Like my grandmother used to always say, what you do in the dark will come to the light. So,
Yeah.
a student may indicate a lot of wonderful things on their application. And if it's on your application, it's fair game. So when we start to speak about this wonderful research that you say you did and you're unable to articulate, that's a problem.
Yeah.
If you say you have over 200, 300 hours of shadowing, certainly there should be some terminology. We're not asking you to go in depth with the textbook, but there should be some terminology, something there that you will say to alert anyone that, this student actually probably did do 300. So you have to be really careful about what you're putting in that application and make sure you can own it, because that's the interview time is the time to speak on that.
No, that is excellent advice, because like you I feel like there is a trend to kind of embellish or fluff up your application at
Oh yeah.
times. And being able to back it up and be able to speak to your experiences is huge.
Hmm.
So making sure that you guys do that as an applicant is super important.
Yeah.
So a lot of schools have these programs with the community, whether they come from an underserved background or a rural community. They often save some seats for those kinds of students in their programs. Do you guys do that and factor that in as you're going through the application cycle when selecting students, or hey, we're just trying to pick the very best students that we can?
No, we don't. We don't have selected seats, but part of our mission is to serve underrepresented populations. So we do look for students who are and come from underrepresented background. So that could be racially, that could be socially, economically, people from rural areas, people from other countries who have moved to this area. So there's no unique formula, but we're looking for the uniqueness in the candidate. So but we don't reserve seats. One thing that really makes students who are successful at Howard really stand out is really their volunteerism.
Really?
Yeah, because that's part of our mission statement. And one thing about us, part of their graduation requirements. When people talk about graduation requirements, our students have to do a certain number of hours of community service outside of what's regimented in their curriculum. And so we don't particularly want that student when we say, hey, we have a outreach on this Saturday and another outreach next Saturday. We don't want that student who's like, I don't want to go to these outreach. I want to spend my Saturday. That's my free time. So we really are laser focused on those students when we pick up their application and there's a level of involvement in the community. And here's my second freebie for tonight. If you are applying to dental school in the spring of 25, I look at your application and you start doing volunteer work in 2024, it's great that you're in the community, but that level of commitment, why, it leaves the question, why now?
Yeah.
No.
It's like, are you trying to fluff that application
There
up
you go.
right before?
There you go.
No,
There-
totally. I think that's one thing that we kind of see as a trend is like, hey, schools really want to see that you're committed over a long period of time, not just
Yeah.
months before you turn that thing in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, no, I love that you said that because it's just such a thing that is like, oh, here's me procrastinating getting my shadowing or volunteering hours, and let's throw it in at the very end,
Hmm.
which is just not the way to do it. So, I'm glad you said that. In terms of like, so let's say we've gotten through the interview stuff, applicants gotten through the interview,
Hmm.
and how much do you like the applicant or do you not like the applicant to contact you after that December 15th deadline? So obviously you guys aren't going to tell anyone, hey, you got into school until that 15th deadline.
Hmm.
But I know some schools don't like you to reach out at all. What's Howard's position on that?
Well, I'll say it's different strokes for different folks. I will say this for me. Um, One thing that when I came into this position that I just did not understand, and I still have a difficult time understanding, some of my students are helping me to sift through it, is this letter of intent thing.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, I
That
don't
that
know.
that letter of intent thing just makes zero sense to me. I'm going to be honest. I'm like, why?
Yeah, I will be honest with you. I think sometimes you knock yourself down a bit on the list when you do that because your intent is shown when you show up for the interview,
Yeah.
and so at that point it's out of your hands. You go in, you do your very best job, and you leave there confident and knowing that you've done your best job, and it's up to that missions committee. So you sending me a letter of intent, and here's the problem, that I need young people to understand why that is a problem, because it shows you can't follow instructions. Nowhere in the application process does it says to submit a letter of intent.
Uh-huh.
Nowhere.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's almost as if you're trying to bargain your way into a position. That's not in the application process. So if I and so my students explain to me that that's an applicant way of showing me that they really want to be here. That's how they understood. So I always ask them to help me sift through it. But again, you showing me that you want to be here comes from the fact that you paid to apply, because you do pay for every school you apply, and if you're interviewed, that you show up. So I can't. If Robert submit a letter of intent and Mary did not, and I vote for Robert because he submitted a letter of intent and that's not in the application, now I'm being unfair.
Yeah.
So for me, I'll be honest with you, Dr. Townsend, I don't even read them. If I happen to open an email and it starts off as a letter of intent, I don't read the rest. I just
I can I just say I love that. I think the letter of intent is just so silly. It's like just like you said, it's like this thing, this extra thing, just trying to bribe your way in,
yeah,
and it's like no, just let the chips fall where they fall.
absolutely.
Like, well, how do you feel about this? Like, if a student was like, "Hey, I'm on the wait list," just kind of wanted to follow up and see um, where my status is.
Hmm.
I know that, for example, can be taken very differently depending on how it's worded.
Hmm.
What is your opinion on that?
So I will say, if the letter is very short and succinct, just stating just what you said, I just want to check a status check. I have no problem with that, because if I'm told I'm on the wait list, I do want to, I want to get a check. Now, where it becomes problematic is if the phone calls or the emails are coming every week.
Yeah,
You know,
where it's just overwhelming. It's
it's
like, oh my
overwhelming.
goodness, I
Hmm.
got a life.
Yeah, and I do understand that's because students, again, they don't understand what happens behind the scenes with the application. So no one person, not even me as the director, can make a unilateral decision that you will be accepted to dental school. It goes through a committee. So,
Hmm.
and the committee, outside of meeting as a committee, we are faculty members. So we have classes and clinics that we have to attend to. So we have to arrange special times to review our wait list again and determine who's coming off the wait list. The other thing is, for us, what I think what a lot of students don't understand. So dental school is a lot like having a basketball team, and I explain this to students. You go out on, I'm short, I'm 5'7", so if I walk out on the court and someone is picking teams to play basketball, only 5 members can be on that team.
Yeah,
So I know I'm at a disadvantage because I'm short. So one thing I have to do is be able to show that I have speed and that I can handle the ball in that point guard position, or that I can be in that two position and shoot. If I can't do that, my chances of making that team are five. So it's different from college. So I think a lot of students think I should just get an answer. It's not that cut and dry, because with a class of 75, I have to have a seat to offer you a position.
Hmm. There's
So
only so many seats in the school, so
in the
it's like,
school, yeah. So if a student doesn't decline, that a student that has been accepted, if they don't decline their seat, I don't have a seat to give you. So what do I always say to students? Patience is more valuable than gold sometimes, because if you're on the wait list and I haven't given you a letter of denial, that's better than getting a letter of denial. I mean, if you just have to have an answer, we can do that rapidly. But I think you'd rather have the patience, because we're
uh,
saying we still see something in you. We just don't have the seat. However, if the seat comes available, we will let you know.
I think that is extremely valuable insight. I think students view that wait list of like, oh, just in just so many different ways.
Yeah.
And just viewing it from that perspective of, hey, the seats are full, or we have extended invitations for a certain seat that we haven't heard back from yet. So I
Yep.
can't give you the seat yet.
That's right.
So I think if every pre-dental student and it viewed it that way, I think that would solve a lot of anxiety behind, you know, getting into dental school. I mean, just,
Yeah.
hey, the seat's not there right now. It may be in a month. It may be next cycle.
That's correct.
So
That's
I
correct.
love that. All right, so now we're going to move into some advice questions from you, and you've been giving great advice this entire time. So this has been great. I've really enjoyed chit chatting with you here.
Okay.
Let's talk a little bit about just some final things. What advice do you have for people as they're preparing their application? We've already unpacked a lot of this.
Hmm.
As they're preparing their application, what would you tell an applicant? Hey, this is super important for you to do. I love it when applicants have this on their application.
Hmm. Hmm. I love it when the applicant have this on their application. That one's a tough one for me, because I like uniqueness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but again, I think just being able to show that, one, you have your posts on the community, that you are, um, dentistry is a giving type of profession. And so, where and how are you giving right now? If you're having difficulty demonstrating that right now, why should I think that it's going to change because you're Dr. So and so? So that's number one. I think number two is something that's somewhat out of the student's control. I talked about earlier, but it's really that letter of recommendation, because I can say that John came to class. He was in my biochemistry class. John performed well. John got an A in my biochemistry class. I think he'll be a great dentist. As opposed to talking about Larry, Larry was in my biochemistry class, um, and he worked really hard. He would come and talk to me about his aspirations. He would always seek help where he had shortcomings. He really improved his grade. He got a B in the class, but he ended up being a tutor. He ended up helping me with my research. So, Larry is showing a little bit more versatility there. So when recommendations come like that and they really speak to knowing the student, it'll give you a leg up. So I always say to students, be prudent about selecting the people who will write your letter. Get those people who can talk about more than your grade, but people who can talk about your character and what you can bring to dental education outside of the grade. Is there anything else I would look for on the application? A well-written essay. Um, I can't tell you
You talking mainly the personal statement, or are you talking
the
all the
personal statement.
essays?
Well, all of them, but definitely the personal statement. Um, I'll be honest with you, like after you read about 300 or 400 essays and everyone had a broken tooth and someone fixed it,
Oh,
or
I know.
everyone
You're like, oh, can you give me something different? Can
give
you give me
me
a different story,
something
please?
different. Yeah.
Like, it's
So,
like, goodness, how many of you had a dad that was a dentist, or how many of you had
Uh,
this experience with your orthodontist? You're like, oh, this changed
orthodontist.
my life.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, come on, let's throw a little something unique in there, guys.
unique in there. I had a student. He was in the summer program here, and he was applying to medical school, and he had a lot of anxiety because about writing that personal statement, and he was telling me he just didn't know how to approach it. And I said, we'll work on some things or whatever. One day I was out strolling on campus, and he was out there taking pictures, of the flowers, the birds, just a lot of pictures. So I looked at his pictures, really, really, really good pictures. And he talked about how much he loved photography. He does it on the side. And I was telling him, you could really make some extra money doing this. I say all of that to say, when we sat down to talk about his personal statement, and he was saying that he really didn't know if he had anything special to bring out, and I told him, you're doing this photography. You're telling me that you're doing it. Sometimes you take pictures at events, weddings, etc. You don't charge because you love it. It's a hobby. But you don't realize you're giving to people because you're saving them a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, the attention to detail that you're paying as a photographer. Those are things that you need as a physician. So why would you not talk about that in your personal statement? It speaks to who you are. I can look at your transcripts and tell how you perform, but who are you?
Mm-hmm.
And he's in medical school right now. I like
Wow.
to think it was because of that personal statement.
I'm gonna agree with you. I think it's because of the personal statement for sure. You helped him open his eyes a little bit there.
Yeah, you're more than just your grades. The students who don't do as well, they will say that rapidly. I'm more than my grades. But I think all students need to take that mantra and live it. You are more than your grades. No, now write about it.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to what you had said earlier too. I think you guys don't just admit people just based on your grades. The kid with the A's and the B's and the 24 and the DAT, like, yeah, it looks nice on the stats for the school, but you really want someone that's going to be good for the school.
Yeah,
And be a good person socially as well, and have a life outside of that. So yeah, I think take your pictures, man. Take
exactly.
your hobbies and write about them and pursue them along with dentistry, because they're going to make you just a better person. So
Absolutely.
what advice? So sometimes students get into multiple different schools. What advice do you have for those students that get into multiple different schools on picking which one to attend? How do they go about picking which one is right for them?
hmm you know, if you were to have asked me this maybe a decade ago, I would say follow your heart. Um, I know when I was a young dental school student, I turned down schools. I turned down schools had the tuition was not as high as Howard at the time, a state school, because I felt an affinity to Howard. So I followed my heart. I followed the place where I felt like I would be at home, where I could flourish. Um, I think my position has changed now because with the escalating cost of dental school, I would say follow the money.
Yeah.
And the only time I would not follow the money is if I really felt like I wouldn't flourish there and I wouldn't be supported,
Mm-hmm.
because all money is not good money. So that's one of those things where I don't think I'm of any use to a student, because I would really say you really have to know yourself. One thing I teach my students here is how to make a SWOT. And if your listeners don't know what that is, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, make a little chart. If you look that up, SWOT, SWOT. And I always tell them add to it, take away from it, move things around, and really, because it really speaks to yourself and it can help you make those hard decisions. So it's really hard for anyone to tell you where you should go to dental school, because guess what? You're the one who have to live it out for the next 4 years.
Yep. And then you get to live with the education you got for the rest of your career.
That's correct.
So, no, I think that's excellent advice. It's not the first time I've heard that, of, hey, you want to go where hopefully you will flourish, but also just be cautious of what the money is, because
That's
you're going to have to pay that back at some point.
that's right.
So that's excellent. Okay. Last couple questions here. What advice would you give for students that get rejected? Let's say they don't get into any school this cycle.
hmm
What do you tell to that student that didn't get in
Hmm.
for the upcoming cycle?
A bump in the road is not a cliff. It doesn't mean you have to jump off. You can still continue your journey. I think I'll tell you, I've been spending the last couple of days in the past couple of weeks now that the cycle is coming to an end within a lot of meetings with students who, they want to ask the question, what can I do to make my application better?
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I do when a student calls me, now you're going to go into a educational session with me because I always ask the student, okay, first in dental school we learn this thing. You know about this. You have to self-evaluate.
Yep.
When you do your preparations, and you have to grade yourself before the teacher grades you. So, looking at your application, do you think your application presents you as a competitive applicant? And I know in your heart you feel that you are, and I know that you're going to be a great dentist. Just may not be your time. So first, you have to start there, and it's problematic for me if a student cannot look at their own record and say, I'm lacking here, or this is not appealing here, or I can improve here. However you want to put it, right? But that stems back to that earlier problem that I spoke of. Students equate dental school to undergraduate studies. You apply to be a biology major, they accept you or they don't. It's not like that. We have a certain number of seats, and we
Mm-hmm.
don't create seats because you have to have a dental chair. You have to have a chair in the lab. You have to have a chair in the clinic. So if I only have 80 chairs, I'm not going to accept 100 students,
Yeah.
you know. So start there, self-evaluate, figure out where you went wrong, and then you figure out how you can correct it. If it's a matter of your grades, um, I definitely encourage students to do a master's program. I know it's longer, but it shows that you are committed. It gives you an advanced degree, which gives you a step up. And it shows those are upper level class. Again, post bac is really a review. So
Mm-hmm.
they're not as heavily weighed as they used to be when you and I were coming. Well, I don't know when you came out of school. I came out in the '90s, so
Yeah,
um,
I was I was 2022, so
mhm.
still
You were
pretty
right
recent.
behind me. Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
similar situation. Yeah. And then if it's a matter of the DAT, a lot of students they don't do well on the DAT, and they say I'm going to a post bac, and I always say to them, well, that's not your problem.
Yeah, the problem is the DAT.
The DAT, you're trying to fix grades, and your grades are fine. So, do you need to sit with someone and say, is it my test taking strategies? Do I have testing anxiety? Am I not reading the question carefully? You have to figure out, what's your Achilles heel, and you have to work on that. Don't try to fix something that's not broken. But
Mm.
I would figure out where I'm short, and I would try to correct it, and then I would reapply.
Well, awesome. I love that. Okay, well, last quick piece.
Mhm.
Any final words of advice? I know we've kind of
Mhm.
you've been giving advice the entire stinking time. You've been killing it. So, and any final things that you've got? I mean, you keep whipping things out of your sleeve here, so this is great.
Okay, okay. Well, I think prior to becoming a pre-dental student, one of the biggest piece of advice I try to get to more high school students now because if you're a student like me and going into college that you want to be a dentist, I think a lot of students choose the wrong undergraduate institution. Um, we don't know. We don't know. We sometimes we pick schools because it's out of the state or because we like the colors or we like the mascot. But if going into college you want to do medicine or dentistry, you need to first ask, is there a pre-med or pre-dental office on that campus?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a pre-dental advisor? The number of students who I speak to who didn't even know or don't even utilize their pre-dental advisor, those are the students who usually have big hiccups. Now, there are those who say, well, there's an advisor, but, they really don't know. They can't. But see, that comes from studying where you are applying. I was very fortunate to go to a school that had a very robust pre-med office. So we got that guidance, we got that advice, and it gave you a big leg up as opposed to someone trying to figure it out. So I would start there. The other thing I would say to a student who's applying now, you really need to have a mentor. You really need to have someone, and not just to bring you in your office and see what's going on. That's great, but you really need to have someone who is attuned to helping you get that very best application. Your job is to get the grades and the DAT score, but someone who can really help you to mature, who can help you to develop your personal statement and those other essays on that application. So if you don't have someone you can fall back on, who can help you, who can put you in line with someone who can help you, it really puts you at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
So those are the things I would say.
Wow, Dr. Salter, you have been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been a lot of fun to just get to know you and your background, and also just to kind of get some excellent advice. You've more than unpacked so many things for us today, so thank you so much.
No, thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate being here.
All right, well, that is it for today on the Dental School Guide podcast. That's all for today's episode of the Dental School Guide podcast. We hope you've gained valuable insights and inspiration to fuel your journey into dentistry. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more expert advice, inside tips, and engaging discussions. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review. It would mean the world to us. Until next time, keep smiling, keep striving, and remember, your dental dreams are closer than you think. Thanks for tuning in to the Dental School Guide podcast.